Greetings, everyone. God's Hand and the TV news is where we compare the TV news with Bible prophecy. As we see God's hand moving to save mankind, we should feel good that humanity will survive Armageddon and prosper for another 1,000 years into the future. God wants us to see His hand at work to give us hope for the days ahead. Romans 15:13. May God of hope, may the God of hope fill you with all joy. God wants you full of joy and with peace. Believing, you have to believe the words of God are going to come to be true, that you may abound in hope. God wants us all full of hope for the days of the future, days ahead. Here is today's question. Will a stronger America save Israel? Now, why do we ask this question? Because God is telling us that a superpower army saves Israel in the end times. A lot of people are telling us, talking about it, that we are in the end times. Daniel 11, God gave this to Daniel to write, and it says, at the time of the end. The king of the north uses many ships, this is a many ships army, to overwhelm some Arab countries. After that happens, this same superpower army enters Israel to save that nation from a massive attack by many Arab nations. Daniel 11:41. He shall also enter the glorious land, Israel, and many countries shall be overthrown. That was verse 41. News headlines from the past show a long history of Arab nations attacking the nation of Israel with the intent of destroying the nation of Israel. When the future biggest attack ever occurs, God shows it's going to be totally different from the times before. This time, a superpower army enters Israel and at the same time overthrows and captures many of the Arab nations. God describes the capture of these nations in this way in Daniel 11, verse 43. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver and over all the precious things of Egypt, also the Libyans and the Ethiopians. So it gives you a little clue to what's happening. When Hitler captured France back in World War II, he had power over all the precious things of France. His troops were everywhere. You couldn't do anything in France without the German troops okaying whatever it is you wanted to do. Just think for a minute. How many boots on the ground would be needed to have total control over many Arab nations? This is World War III sized military action. This will be a gigantic military operation in the Middle East. Question: what superpower nation has already been a great friend of the nation of Israel? If you Google that, it will show that many benefits to Israel have recently come from superpower America. Next question: would the other two superpower armies, Russia and China, want to save Israel from many Arab nations? The answer is obvious. They would not. Daniel 11:41 and Daniel 11:45 show that Israel does not get destroyed by the Arab nations in a World War III battle. God shows 6 verses after Daniel 11:41, the Great Tribulation occurs where the nation of Israel is destroyed, totally destroyed, by the beast person of Revelation. So how do we know this? God shows it to us in Revelation 11:2, in Luke 21:24, and in Daniel 12, verse 7. Revelation 11:2, And they, the Gentiles, will tread the holy city, that's Jerusalem, underfoot for 42 months. In biblical terms, that's 3.5 years. Beginning with the abomination of desolation day, Jesus talks about that in Matthew 24, the beast power person starts a war that utterly destroys the nation of Israel for 3.5 years until the return of Christ. We see this in Luke 21:24. They will fall by the edge of the sword. In modern terms, they'll fall in battle. There's a war and they'll get killed. And they'll be led away captive into all nations, like World War II, where they went off to prison camps in World War II in different countries. And Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. God told Daniel to record Israel's total destruction thousands of years before these times of the end. Daniel 12:7. It shall be for a time and times and half a time. That's a little curious Bible language there, but in Bible language it means 3.5 years. When the power of the holy people, the nation of Israel, has been completely shattered until all these things shall be finished, meaning at the return of Jesus Christ to the planet. Recent news headlines told us that American power is seen as declining by nations all around the world. God is telling us to expect big changes from what we see now, where America will climb to its greatest power in the days ahead. Question, why must this happen? Because God plans to save Israel out of the hands of the Arabs and not let them be destroyed before he has prophesied they'll be destroyed by the beast power of Revelation. America grew rapidly to superpower status. You can go back and check this in your history books. After Pearl Harbor. Back then, the Japanese attack awoke the sleeping giant of America, which then conquered Japan at the end of World War II. To have total control of many Arab nations will require America's greatest wartime effort ever thought of, ever seen of, ever to be contemplated. The mighty hand of God has pre-written our future history for us. If we study his words and we ask for guidance, we will come to see and to trust in what he is trying to tell us in the scriptures. The more we trust in the hand of God, the more we will trust his plan to save humanity and to bring about abundant peace and prosperity on planet Earth. That's his plan. The TV news tells us America's decline, but God shows us he will use a much stronger America to save Israel from the massive Arab attack. Stay tuned. Be watching for more videos of God's hand and the TV news.